Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 143 of the Best Games Period. This is the first official episode of the show after the new year, so happy new year, everybody. And you might have noticed from the title of the show, or possibly if you're viewing live from the other person who's here, today we're recording with the wonderful Jared Schuh.
It's Schuh. It's the hardest. Like everyone, whenever they read it, it's like Schuh. I've gotten Schuh. I've gotten Schuh. I've gotten Schuh. And like I'm like no, it's actually a German last name. But yeah, it literally means like the shoe you put on your foot, which is really weird.
Oh.
Like I think it like kind of drives. Anyway, that's a tangent that we don't need to go on. But yes, Schuh, Jared Schuh. Hi, that's me.
Also known as Queso Bros on social media and pretty much everywhere, it seems like.
Yeah, pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, so welcome to the show, and I'm super happy to have you here. We've actually been trying to get you on the show for like a long time now. So I'm glad we can finally chat and say hello and get to the game you nominated, because I'm super excited to talk about it.
Yeah, it's finally happening.
Yay!
Yay!
So who is this elusive Jared Schuh?
Oh man, who am I?
Who is the Queso Bro?
The Queso Bro. That's a question. I am a weirdo on the internet, but I also like to, I haven't done this in forever. Actually, I haven't podcasted in maybe about like half a year, and that's really, really strange. But yeah, so I kind of exist around social media, and I'm actually going to be getting into doing some creative content around games media and stuff like that coming soon. Work in progress. But currently, yeah, I kind of exist around and try to have like good takes that aren't awful on the internet, and
that's hard to do, apparently.
Exactly, right? But also like to give games critique in a kind of comedic and fun way without at all falling into the trap of the negativity that all of the internet has.
I'm trying to figure out a creative way of asking you what your secret project is, but I don't know if I can pry that out of you. It is secret.
I think the secret is that I don't fully understand what I'm doing yet, so that I try to pass it off as I know what I'm doing, but I have no idea what I'm doing 100%. So let's just pass it off as that.
It's okay. I recently interviewed for a job where they literally weren't able to tell me what I would be doing if they hired me. So
okay.
That was an interesting interview.
Yeah, I would bet.
It was fun, but yeah, they did not know what they wanted. Well, is there anything? Are there any hot takes burning a hole in your pocket right now that you're seeing going around that you want to talk about?
I don't know. There's a lot of Star Wars discourse going around right now, but I'd rather not jump into that.
I mean, we could if you wanted.
I mean, I'm always down because I love Star Wars, but like, depending on how you look at it, it could be a hot take or a good take, or I don't know. It's complicated. Star Wars is a complicated thing.
Give us your take. Give us your possibly hot, possibly cold take.
I don't know. I liked The Rise of Skywalker and thought it was a flawed but fun movie, because every Star Wars movie is a flawed but fun movie. And everyone around me seems to hate it for some reason. And I mean, not for some reason. There's reasons. As I said, every Star Wars movie has its issues. But yeah,
this particular flaw just seemed to really resonate with some people.
Yeah, and like I understand it, but like yeah, there's just a lot. I'm like one of those weirdos that like reads all the books, reads all the comic books, watches all like the sideshows, and knows a bunch of like trivia. So like, if like, hey Jerry, what does this mean? I'm that guy with Star Wars, but yeah. So like a lot of it was a lot of me kind of wrestling with, are people just angry at this for whatever reason or whatnot? And I'm saying a lot of nothing, so I'm gonna stop here.
No, it's interesting because seen a lot of hate for the movie as well. I haven't seen the movie. I don't. There's just something about all of the trailers that I've seen where I was just kind of like, you know what? I've seen every Star Wars that's come out in my lifetime in theaters. I don't necessarily know that I need to see this one.
Yeah.
And maybe that's just like where I am in my life.
And it's perfectly okay. Like, I understand Star Wars isn't for everyone either. It's like it's the nerdiest like kind of fantasy you could probably get into, like maybe right behind Lord of the Rings. But yeah, like yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, all right. You have given a hot. I believe that is a hot take.
The movie is a good movie. There's my hot take.
And yeah. So if people want to fight you on that, they can find you on social media, Queso Bros. But I don't think our audience is that virulent about Star Wars. At least they didn't get super mad at me when I wasn't a huge fan of the Respawn game.
Oh, really? Did you not like it at all?
I liked it. Like, I liked the gameplay, except it wasn't quite as tight as I was hoping it would be.
That was my issue with it, was that like it felt very loose in its gameplay overall,
especially after a game that came out like Sekiro.
Yeah,
where that game was pinpoint on point with that kind of combat too, and I was just kind of like, this gameplay is kind of throwing me off. But like the big thing was just the storyline. I liked a lot of aspects of the story, but the way it all flowed together just didn't really hit me right. Like the big moment that I kind of come down to with like regards to the story and the character development and stuff like that. I couldn't remember the working man who Cal Kestis had been like spending the last 3 years of his life getting to know on the job, who sacrificed his life to save Cal. And it's just kind of like, that should probably have been like a really defining moment for Cal's character. And that should have been something that maybe came up ever again.
You know,
but it doesn't.
As someone who remembers a lot of Star Wars names, I don't think I can name him either. So I don't think that you're at all in a minority for that.
It bothers me when Star Wars doesn't care about, like, gets into the mindset of like, well, anyone who doesn't have force powers isn't that important.
Yeah, it tends to do that a lot.
Yeah.
Unless they got a cool jetpack or something.
Unless they got a cool jetpack. Hey, Mandalorian. I did like the Mandalorian.
Oh yeah, Mandalorian. Gotta love that Baby Yoda.
But I felt like such a sucker. Like I didn't watch it until it was all out. I saw all the memes, and I was just kind of like, yeah, Baby Yoda's cute, but like, obviously it's corporate manipulation. Like, I'm not gonna fall for that. And then I finally sat down and watched it, and I'm like,
he can't be that cute, can he?
I would die for Baby Yoda.
I would die for Baby Yoda.
It's so cute.
My mom actually, like, when she finished it, immediately went on Amazon and pre-ordered one of those, like, Cabbage Patch Doll Baby Yoda things that they're having for sale.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
It is really cute. If you haven't seen The Mandalorian, it's super cute. Gosh. Oh, I forgot to unmute myself on the stream. Sorry about that, stream. But you know what? You got to hear all of
my
Jared's delicious words. Hey! There we go. Sorry about that, stream. So we did not bring you on here to talk about Star Wars, as much as I would love to just talk about Star Wars for the entire time.
Always wanting to talk about Star Wars. But I gotta get a read on someone whenever they want to talk to me about Star Wars before I talk about Star Wars with them, because then I know like how far to go into Star Wars I should go. Because there's just so much. It's brain breaking.
I need to get you onto a podcast with with another former guest on this show, Elijah, because he also knows a crap ton about Star Wars. I just want to see you guys bounce off each other. Apparently, he speaks a little bit of Mandalorian.
I can't do that. I cannot do that. I can't speak Mandalorian whatsoever. I think I can understand a little bit of Huttese, but not Mandalorian.
I admire that sort of like dedication and like knowledge base. But I need to see you two bounce off of each other. Maybe we can do like a Rogue Squadron episode and I can get both of you on.
Yeah.
All right. But the real reason that you are here today is to discuss Breath of the Wild with me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's go.
The 2017 Nintendo, I think it's fair to say classic. It's only, I guess, almost 3 years old now, which is kind of crazy to think about.
That sentence you just said, like, was my entire brain being like, as I was playing it, being like, this can't be my favorite game of all time, can it? And then I play like 80 hours. I'm like, oh no, this can't be my favorite game of all time. Then I go to 100 hours and I'm like, oh man, it might be getting there. And then 200 hours hits and I'm like, okay, fine, this is my favorite game of all time.
Like the entire time you're playing, it's just a conversation about, man, this is really good, but is it that good?
Well, because I've played most of the Zelda games and like. Mm-hmm. Like this is like a very different kind of Zelda game, and so like when I first like started like finding out where it like was ranking quality wise in my head, I was only starting out comparing it to other Zelda games, which kind of like did it a disservice because it does so much different. But overall, like whenever I kind of stopped looking at it in that perspective and started looking at it with as in how it was changing how I was looking at playing other games, that's when I saw the impact that it completely had on me.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that while it is like very, very different from other Zeldas, it's also, I mean, when I play it, I feel like it's like the complete distillation of what that first Legend of Zelda was. Yeah. Like, I think that playing, how do I put this? Like playing Breath of the Wild for the first time and being dropped into that giant world and given very little direction. I mean, you're given pretty good direction. It's very subtle, but like you can also just totally ignore it, right?
Absolutely.
Is very much like getting dropped into that original Legend of Zelda guy, just like, here's a wooden sword, go nuts. And I struggle to kind of think about trying to think of like another game that really does that. Like I can't. There's very little that captures that same feel, except maybe Dark Souls.
Dark Souls, I think, takes definitely like expecting that because of Dark Souls taking inspiration from the original Legend of Zelda as well, but like in a slightly deviated turn. I think Breath of the Wild did. But yeah, like they both have very similar like throw you into the game and figure it out on your own kind of feels to them.
Yeah. And I think that works, like that's kind of magical in a way, because I don't think there's a way you can like artificially replicate that outside of going as big as Nintendo did. Like even with Dark Souls now, like you can find a bajillion guides to Dark Souls, right? You can find this is the way you're supposed to go.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And you could, I guess, do the same with Breath of the Wild, but it's a game that is very hard to like guide for, right? Like it's very much built to kind of eschew guides altogether, because the entire point of the game is exploration and adventure.
Yeah, like the exploration and discoverability of like just of what is this world that you're dropped in is kind of like the main focus of it, and like that I think is what makes it special, because like you do have that exploration in like the, as we were talking about just like in Dark Souls, like you do have like a world you have to kind of like find routes through, and find different ways to get about, and find different ways to like defeat enemies and whatnot, but like it's not like, hey, literally pick a direction, go that direction. Eventually kind of like funnels you into the area you need to go. Where Breath of the Wild was like, hey, what if like there were no funnels whatsoever?
Yeah, it's a really cool and freeing feeling. Like I think that the gameplay in Breath of the Wild might be pretty close to perfect.
I would say so. But that like also I can see why people would say it's not as well. So
yeah, I mean, like there's the infamous like Jim Sterling 7 out of 10 review, which like 7 out of 10.
Yeah, that's a good
bad,
review.
but whatever. But I think that the point like he brings up about like weapon breakage is like on track. I can see why that would irritate a lot of people.
100%.
And it is also irritating when you get like, you know, a crazy good weapon and it breaks after like fighting 5, you know, low level grunts or whatever. So like it's a game that is like, it definitely has some things that are maybe questionable creative decisions, but overall I think it works really, really well, especially when it comes to like combat and exploration encounters.
Like I don't think that I've like felt like more in sync with a combat system since Breath of the Wild. Just like how like you've played it, so like the like trials that are in the shrines that are like specifically combat based, do you remember running into any of those at all? Okay, so those I ran into a really high level one early on and didn't want to leave until I just figured out how to do it without having to come back with like stronger gear or anything. And with that determination I had, ended up defeating something I probably shouldn't have been able to defeat, just by kind of figuring out not necessarily the patterns of the enemy, but like how Link as an object reacts in the situations that you have to put him in, and with all of the items that you kind of, or all the gameplay verbs that you're given early on, that you kind of just like are continuing to grow and kind of adapt to, using your imagination and figuring out, oh, what is this one way I could cheese this, or one way I could like completely change how this is probably supposed to be done, really resonated with me in many different ways.
Yeah, especially when you bring in like the physics of it. Like you see those crazy videos on like YouTube of like someone one-shotting Lionel.
I love it.
with the physics, or like traveling across the land by like slingshotting themselves on a rock. That's a crazy level of like adaptability to player input, and I think that that's really the big secret to Breath of the Wild's success, because like in previous Legend of Zeldas, you could tackle most enemies in whatever way you wanted. Like you could use your sword, megaton hammer, whatever, bombs. But this game just offers you so many more tools right off the bat that, you know, it just kind of is mind-boggling, and most of them are very simple to grasp on the surface, but are very difficult to master. And it's the kind of thing where as you get better using them, you start discovering like, oh, I can combine them this way, and like it's a natural process of discovery, which the game is really great at doing, like fostering, I guess.
Yeah, like
in like
I
all
always
regards.
relate it to in some aspects Portal, with not necessarily, well, I mean, the shrines kind of remind me of little Portal levels. But overall, like the idea of being dropped into a situation and just kind of like picking at things until you kind of figure out how things react to things, um,
Hmm.
and kind of like solving a puzzle room in that way, and continuing to kind of like branch out what you thought you could do with these individual verbs that you have, and like I don't know, I can't think of anything more exciting than that, to be honest. I just like puzzles. Puzzles are cool, and giving me really weird tools to solve really weird puzzles is my jam.
Heck yeah. The one nitpick, I guess, not even really a nitpick, I think it's actually larger than a nitpick, is the way that the game tackles its narrative storytelling.
Yeah, I would also agree with that.
Okay. I was wondering if that was going to be a controversial like statement, because like I think that the emergent storytelling that this game does is very good, like discovering the different stories and narratives that like the average folk who live in this world are going through.
Hmm.
There are some really cool moments in that. Like there's some great little discoveries. Like um, I don't know, like discovering that, or even just like little interactions that speak to larger character facets that aren't necessarily displayed in game, but you can kind of infer. I really like that. It adds a lot of depth to what could otherwise be two-dimensional characters. Um, but when it comes to the actual like main storyline, all of it's happened in the past. So
Yeah.
a lot of the like action is already done, which on the one hand is perfect for a game like this. Um, and on the because it's more like you are discovering the story,
Yeah.
which kind of plays into the theme of exploration. But on the other hand, it really kind of takes away from the player agency in the story itself, which kind of flies in the face of the anything goes mentality of the gameplay.
Yeah, especially when like all of those like background cutscenes can be found in random orders.
Hmm.
Of You don't really get a like a through line narrative overall, unless you like piece it all together like on a YouTube compilation afterwards. Um, but like yeah, like it's I'm of two minds with it, because like in on one hand it's bad narrative by just not kind of like positioning it in a way to tell a story in a good and understandable way.
Hmm.
But the other like my other like optimistic side of it is um kind of thinking, oh, is maybe that's the point of it, because you're in a desolate, like post-apocalyptic, weird like land that has obviously gone through something, and you're piecing it together, and as you said earlier, Lee, like the kind of discoverability being woven into the narrative in that way. So like I see why, like I would agree, like if we were looking at it as in like, okay, the story overall, if we were to like just take one look at it, I would say not very well structured, pretty bad, pretty boring, kind of go to run of the mill. But if you kind of look at it as like a part of the gameplay, I think it actually shines better in that light, instead of like
Yeah,
comparing it to normal stories.
yeah, and I would agree with that to an extent, because
Yeah.
I don't feel like the game like I tend to like when games integrate gameplay and storytelling, and this game does it in the sense that you're talking about, but it also doesn't when it comes to like the player actually interacting with that narrative, because it's
Yeah.
kind of because it is set in the past, it's kind of this distant and untouchable thing. um and I think that it would have been improved if kind of that same philosophy of like tackling it however you wish kind of extended into actually affecting that narrative.
I would also agree on that too. There's so many different ways this could have gone too. Like
Oh, for sure.
every time I play that game, I'm like, wow, this like one little decision here could have like changed the entire outlook of how I look at like the narrative of it. But yeah, but like it's also like I'm also like not the biggest fan of its overall story. I think it's where it's in its gameplay and its like overall like kind of like challenge that it has, and like kind of themes that it introduces like through its gameplay, that is what really ties me to it, and not necessarily its story.
Yeah, I think I did some reading on the background of this game, and it kind of seems like, well, I need to back up a little bit to make this point. The game's director is Hidemaru Fujibayashi, which I probably butchered his name. But he's been a director on the Legend of Zelda franchise since Oracle of Seasons / Oracle of Ages, and he's worked on a lot of the 2D Zelda games since then. And then after Phantom Hourglass, he made the leap to Skyward Sword, which he directed and also helped write. And then he came back as a director for Breath of the Wild. And I think that a lot of what we see in Breath of the Wild is kind of maybe an overreaction to the negative response that Skyward Sword received for its very heavy-handed narrative direction.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate, because I think that there is definitely a version of this game where maybe it did involve a little bit more narrative direction and options, but I can see why someone who had already been through that experience would maybe overcorrect a little bit. Which is why I'm very intrigued by where the DLC for Breath of the Wild might take the game. It looks like maybe it's much more story oriented, and that would be.
Do you want me to be a little bit of a bummer for you?
Sure.
It's more of what you already played. Yeah, it's more flashback stuff.
Oh.
So yeah, it's honestly, it's more Breath of the Wild. Like that's like the most that's like what I heard everyone like saying about the DLC whenever it was coming out, and it honestly is that it's more shrines, it's more flashbacks, it's more Breath of the Wild, to be honest.
I mean, okay.
Which isn't bad.
It's not
but
bad.
Like, if you're looking for something like that is doing something different than what Breath of the Wild was doing, it's going to be a disappointment overall. But like, yeah, like I know, like especially with the trailers going into that DLC, it made it seem like it was like a story expansion that like you actually got to play stuff in the back and back in time and whatnot. But no, it didn't end up being that whatsoever.
I think that this approach also makes sense in it, kind of going back to what we were talking to earlier, where the Breath of the Wild's director, he is very much, he admires that first Legend of Zelda game quite a bit. And that's a game where, hey, the narrative also took a major backseat in that original game. And I think that in a sense, Breath of the Wild might be seen as kind of like a return to kind of the roots of Legend of Zelda, just in a different era.
Yeah.
Which I think that that's a really intriguing concept, and I mean, given that it's the best-selling game in the franchise to date, I mean, maybe that's the right direction to take this game. The game franchise. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm of two minds with it, because like I also really like the like what Zelda had become like in the decades leading up to Breath of the Wild as well. So like which is like why immediately when I was playing this game, what I said earlier, I was like comparing this game to previous Zelda games, but like they're both very different, and also like really enjoy both of them. So I'd be happy to see them go in either direction. Link's Awakening is in my like top 5 Zelda games of all time, and that is a completely different kind of game than Breath of the Wild is. Yeah.
There's room in the franchise for many different types of games. The Adventure of Link.
Yeah.
The second one, that's straight up an RPG.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, there's definitely a lot of room for experimentation. And I think it's good that maybe they're willing to, like, after a couple generations of kind of playing it relatively safe with Zelda, they're willing to experiment a little bit more, and I think that that's a really good sign and really cool. As with experimenting with any established franchise, it comes with some risk, right?
No, I agree percent with that. Um, what's also really cool about the Zelda franchise is that it's an anthology series that like doesn't. I mean, sometimes they go back and continue storylines from previous games, but like overall, like they typically kind of like are confined to their own games, and there's so much you can do without having them tied down that way. Um, and which is
Mm-hmm.
why, like overall, I think believe the creators wanted to stay away from having a definitive timeline because of that, because it kind of like boxed them in to like creatively. Um, but like there's something special about, which is why I actually like love anthology series, whether it be video games or TV or movies. Just kind of like it allows for so much creativity to kind of flourish, where um, in some cases it might not be able to. Now, sometimes restrictions can be super like encouraging for creativity as well. But like for both of those like outlooks on that, I like really they really intrigue me.
Yeah, I. It's weird in that I don't think I can't think of many games like The Legend of Zelda where it is an anthology series like that. I mean, like,
We have Final Fantasy, um, where like as you we've seen over history for Final Fantasy, they've tried different as well, some good, some
right.
bad, um, but like not necessarily like in kind of genre. I would say of Zelda though is like anthology wise.
Right. And like with Zelda, everything is explicitly connected, which is why fans were so adamant about there being a timeline.
Yeah,
That's really interesting and cool and unique. For me personally, I think that with Breath of the Wild, it suffers from the same thing that Skyrim does for me. And again, this is personal. Like, I just get overwhelmed by the amount of things I can do, and I wind up not doing much or just focusing on like the side quests. Like I haven't beaten Ganon in Breath of the Wild. um, but I have adventured all over the place and like done a lot of things. I just haven't beaten the main quest, and it's the same thing as with Skyrim. Like I never beat the main quest in Skyrim either. I still put like 200 hours into that game. Um, and yeah, I'm kind of wondering, is this like the new future, do you think, for The Legend of Zelda, or do you think that they're going to eventually get back to like, I mean, I guess they already did the remaster of Link's Awakening, but is this kind of what
I think
big
big budget
budget
Zelda
Zelda
is
is
gonna
going
look
to
like
look
this for a
like?
little while. I think eventually, so Breath of the Wild was a throwback to the original Legend of Zelda. We're gonna have people being like, "I want a throwback to Ocarina of Zelda or Link to the Past style Zelda," and that will be like kind of like that design will be in the forefront for nostalgia's sake, or for just for the sake of keeping it fresh. I think for right now, I think like with how positively people receive Breath of the Wild, definitely. I think that's going to keep us in that era for a while. Um, I I don't know because I it's really hard to catch lightning in a bottle twice. Um, obviously, like this is a series that like has like always been around for many decades and like will continue to sell. But I don't know if you can continue to have that exact magic every single time. Um, Especially when you have people like yourself who just said like you don't like the overall like having too many things to do and it overwhelming you. I
It's not even that I don't like it. I just want to be clear. It's just like one of those things where it makes it hard for me to like focus on it for a very long amount of time,
Yeah,
I guess.
because like I'm someone who does not like Skyrim whatsoever for the exact same reason, and
Hmm.
something in Breath of the Wild clicked for me with it. I was like actually like going in before Breath of the Wild came out. I was like terrified of Breath of the Wild because I was like, oh no, this is going to be an open world game. There's going to be too many things trying to get my attention, and I have ADD, and so it's really hard for me to pay attention to things like that. Um, and I was like, oh no, is this the one Zelda game that I'm not going to enjoy? Uh,
Hmm.
and I was really happy that I was proven wrong. But I'm trying to figure out what kind of like was the reason that it didn't overwhelm me.
Yeah. What tethered you
Yeah.
down?
I mean, I do like lists and kind of like checking off things on lists, but
Hmm.
I think it's possible that Breath of the Wild just kind of like made those lists palatable for me. I don't know. But I found
Yeah.
myself like doing everything in that game.
Well, also I think it's the landscape in particular is better laid out, and like a lot of thought has gone into what this land looks like and how it's laid out, and kind of the different feel that you get by going in different places. And it, because it does, well, it doesn't necessarily explicitly direct you um, going to certain places, it does try and kind of indicate where you should be going. And with that, it can kind of like predict like how you're going to be approaching the most likely ways you're going to be approaching, and then it can like visually frame them in interesting ways that can kind of draw your attention. um and I think that does a lot. Like, while it doesn't do the Dark Souls thing where like the level box literally funnels you to where you're supposed to go eventually, it does more subtly do that, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have you have like the two high incline slopes on either side, and you could climb over them. It would just be some work, and not necessarily in the direction you want to go at that moment in time. um and I think that that's really effective in, no matter where you are, always presenting the player with something new, someplace they haven't been to before, um, or an opportunity to just kind of explore a little bit more. And I think that that's a really powerful and potent hook in games, because we don't necessarily get it on that same quality level all that often. Like, when we're talking about like an open world game on this scale, it's either something that's kind of like a janky, like Eastern European like style indie game where you're kind of like you're expected to die like 2,000 times in your first 5 hours, or it's something like a Bethesda game where like a lot of it is kind of one main color palette
Yeah.
and texture, and like it's made with that Bethesda engine that I'm blanking on the name of right now. And it's just kind of,
Creation, I think. Something. Creation
I
engine?
know I know it was Gamebryo for a while.
Oh, that's a cool name.
I For some reason I just associate Gamebryo with the revelation that the train from Fallout 3 was actually an NPC with legs.
Oh,
And just the horrifying imagery of that is
oh
hilarious.
no.
I imagine that it got birthed from a Gamebryo.
Oh no,
Um,
it's Thomas the Tank Engine's son.
um, but yeah, it's this kind of it's colorful. It presents a world that is kind of brimming with promise and mystery. Like, it's both new and old. Like, it's kind of straddling a lot of these lines, and so there's a lot of really interesting and unique things to discover in that world. And it's all seemingly handcrafted by, the biggest budget Nintendo has probably ever thrown at a game. Oh, and also I learned this while I was doing some research. Apparently, the landscape was designed by Monolith Soft.
Oh yeah, I think I remember hearing about that before that game came out. But yeah, that the landscape's nice. It's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I still need to play Xenoblade Chronicles. I still have like touched like the first like 10 hours of that game, and then like something happened and I had to put it down. But I need to get back to that because like all of my friends are like, oh man, these games are amazing, and I need to touch those. One thing I wanted to come back to what you said was like the idea of like there's always something to do wherever you are. And that, okay, so like I've worked in video game retail specifically for the past like 5 years. And so like I have like these like little talking points whenever I tell people about games and whatnot. And one of my things I would tell people about Breath of the Wild was like you could literally stand anywhere, spin around in a circle, and find something to do in like any direction, whether it be something that's going to help you in the long run, like a story, or something that's going to just incrementally help you, like one of the Korok seeds. There's no matter where you stand, you're going to find something interesting that's going to pull you towards in a direction. And like, that's something I adore about it.
Yeah, I mean, I can... Yeah, yes. Yes. That's such a hard quality, I think, to replicate in a world that's the size that Breath of the Wild is. Like, I was playing it the other day, and like I sometimes just kind of forget how big that game is, and I'm wandering around, and I'm like, wow, I've gone a long way. I wonder how far I moved on this map. And I like look at the map, I'm like, oh, that's a pretty good distance. And then I zoom out, I'm like, oh, I forgot that the world was actually
humongous,
that big. Yep. Yeah. And I think that that's a really, I already said this, but that's a really compelling quality to have, where literally anywhere where you're standing within that world, you can find something to do within like a minute.
Yeah, especially in contrast with other like open world RPGs, in which we were talking about like Fallout's and like Elder Scrolls, like where they have their palette is just gray and everything kind of looks the same. Where Breath of the Wild kind of shines in that way of like having variety like all over the place in it. But yeah, I kind of want to just go replay that game now.
I mean, okay, so that's actually something that I wanted to bring up because so I was reading around on some different takes on the internet to just kind of get like a feel for how people were thinking about Breath of the Wild, and I stumbled across this essay called On Video Game Narratives and the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild on a website called Black Nerd Problems, written by Jamil Ragland. And I'm just going to read off what I thought was interesting that he wrote about. And this is the greatest weakness of Breath of the Wild. It is a game that is built on the sense of wonder you get when you find something new, but that wears off eventually. You can't recreate the feeling of seeing Farosh for the first time again. All of the abandoned villages start to look the same. The hapless NPCs you rescue over and over say the same things. Don't get me wrong, I got 143 hours of enjoyment out of this game, and that's that's worth well more than the price of admission. Yet I still feel somewhat empty because I know I'll never play this game from start to finish again. And then a little bit later he said, the drive to explore beyond Hyrule Castle is not created through narrative progression, but a reliance on the player's curiosity and desire for completion. And I think that that's like a really accurate take, but I think that how one interprets that is different.
Yeah,
according to
I actually have like
tastes.
2 things to say about that, because like one, like I like 100% agree with that, because what's really cool about this game, like with the whole idea of it being like malleable and like there's just it's all about interacting with things and exploring things. It can be a different game for so many different people. It could be the most
Mhm.
boring game in the world for someone, or it could be the most like enticing adventure for someone who like me, who like just was like, oh man, look at the little rock there. But then like another thing like that I've actually kind of experienced recently was was going I had a friend who was going through a playthrough and he doesn't know how to switch, so I would bring my switch over to his house and basically I watched him play his entire playthrough, and watching someone experiencing it for the first time was I think just as enjoyable as experiencing it for myself the first time. And
Mhm.
like I didn't think that I would be able to kind of feel that again, but I somehow did through my friend. uh, but
Yeah.
like, but yeah, like this game is, it's one of its really cool qualities is that it can be different for other people, and it can be a boring game for other people, or it could be an amazingly fun. But yeah, like it's a weird game.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't necessarily disagree that like, eventually the novelty of some of these things in the game wears off, but it's also like if you spent 143 hours watching Casablanca, you would probably eventually get sick of watching Casablanca too. So the very fact that it can keep your attention for 143 hours period is, I think, probably a plus in its favor.
Yeah.
Um, and I also think that there's how do I frame this thought? Um, that the narrative being dependent on the player's curiosity, we kind of already touched on that being like, a way of tethering that to gameplay in a way. Um, but I think kind of what you described with your friend is really a way that this game shows its quality, where you can be just as excited that somebody else is discovering it for the first time. I think that's special. That's cool. And I also think that what you said was very right. Like some people never run into that trigger that really loops them into the game world, really.
Yeah.
And I think that there is probably something in this game for everyone, but you might not necessarily run into it right away.
That's a very very valid point.
It's the game is so big, and that works both to its detriment and also its benefit.
Yeah. It benefits for if you're looking for more Breath of the Wild. It's there. In fact,
Right.
they actually have more DLC. So if you want even more Breath of the Wild and more than the Breath of the Wild that you have, then you can go and do that.
I guess I will throw one more, like, and this is tied to my complaint about narrative, but it's more so just a way that Nintendo does conversation systems. I really like how BioWare approached like conversational choices
Mm-hmm.
and talking, because it framed every interaction like it was important. It got you kind of, it changed the camera angle so you knew what like these people looked like. You could kind
Yeah.
of see how they were reacting, and it made them feel more personally connected to you. And so when you had dialogue with them and like, some of the options were silly, like you remember that,
Yeah.
right? I wish Breath of the Wild did something similar to that.
Yeah, this has none of that whatsoever.
But it does have like dialogue options, and so I wish that the presentation of that and implementation of that was a little bit more active and engaging, because there are a lot of really great like conversational moments that just never fully come to life.
Yeah, they're very like the conversation choices that you have like are very like quippy, like one note jokes that are like funny, but that they're over as soon as they're started.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, like 100% agree with that. Like a larger dialogue option for Link in that adventure would actually would way benefit this entire game, especially when it's already lacking in the narrative department.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, that would have gone a long way toward making the story feel much more active, even if Link is largely disconnected from the events that have already happened. Just having more engagement in the present world would have been nice, I guess.
Yeah.
But maybe eventually, the Legend of Zelda will get to the point where like Link can have those conversations voiced. I would have really loved if Impa had been given a voice in this game, just because I really enjoyed turning down the initial, like, when she's like, "Hey, you want to learn more about like what happened?" You get the option to just say no, and she basically is just like, "Oh, all right, I don't want a lame loser like you anyway. It's fine." And you come back later, and she's just kind of like, "Are you ready to not suck?" And yeah,
I didn't know that. See, also, like, what's cool about this game is that, like, I keep on hearing things about this game that I still have not experienced in this game. Because so many people play it in different ways. But yeah, what I'm actually really interested in is to see, because we do have the sequel coming out sometime in the future. Right. I want to see if like Nintendo actually takes any of the criticism that like been giving on this game and kind of like grows from that, or are they going to be Nintendo and actually just completely not listen to things?
I think we might have had a miscommunication earlier when I was talking about like I wonder if in the DLC Nintendo is going to change things. I was actually talking about the sequel.
Oh, okay.
That's coming up because it was a very cinematic like reveal for that.
Oh, okay.
And I'm wondering if that takes place in the present, if that's going to fix some of the narrative issues.
Only time will tell. But yeah, I'm actually pretty stoked to see where that goes because I have no idea what it is really, and that excites me more than even having an inkling of it.
I'm really intrigued that Hidemaru Fujibayashi is apparently taking inspiration from Red Dead Redemption 2 for that.
Yeah, I was like, what? Okay.
I mean, like, I'm down for that. Honestly, though, like, the directions that the Zelda franchise has gone, like, we had a game with a magic train. I would love, like, a more, like, Western-themed Legend of Zelda. Like, it's already, like, halfway there.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you got horses, you got crossbows.
Yep.
We're pretty close already.
Old West, but with less racism, hopefully. Only time will tell. We'll see what it has, but I'm very curious to see what they have up their sleeves.
Also, I want to know, Hot Ganon, is it going to happen? Who knows?
I would love a rehydrated Ganon where they just throw water on him and he becomes a hot man with long hair, and he's like, "Hey, I'm the hero."
Gosh, it's about time they played with that dynamic a little bit more.
What if like Ganon was like your high school rival?
It just becomes a dating sim.
Like not necessarily, yeah, like not necessarily like the bully, but like the okay, I was gonna make a My Hero Academia.
Do it. I love
comparison. That show. I was gonna say him being more of a Bakugo, but Bakugo is definitely a bully.
Yeah.
Bakugo in the current aspect of the show, where he's like less bully and more rival.
Yeah. It only took them 3 seasons for that to solidify.
And then I was like, oh, Bakugo, you actually had some character development going on there.
Gosh, I know that it's not what we came here to talk about, but the current season of My Hero Academia is so good.
I haven't seen a single episode where I haven't been like, awesome.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I honestly, I just like that it's focusing on a couple other characters. I'm like, oh, I didn't expect this character who is relatively minor to get like 3 dedicated episodes this season, but it's awesome.
Please do that to every single character, please.
Yeah, I want that for the Invisible Lady. She's cute.
Yes.
Anyway,
give everyone an arc.
My Hero Academia.
Yep.
Boom. Got it. Nailed it.
Boom. End the show right now. Perfect. That was the perfect closer right there.
So, final thoughts on the Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild. Why is this a best game period? Like,
Okay.
of all time.
I think I mentioned it earlier, but like I had trouble playing other games right after playing Breath of the Wild. I went straight from playing Breath of the Wild to playing Persona 5,
Oh
and
gosh.
yeah, I know that was like the most like what's the term, whiplash I've ever had playing a game. Just because like with how open Breath of the Wild is and how like I enjoyed my time with Persona 5. But it was very different, and it made me realize how like what I loved about Breath of the Wild even more while playing other games.
Mhm.
And like I think that same year Assassin's Creed Origins came out, and
Maybe
had
Odyssey?
similar. I think it was Origins 2017.
Oh
And,
gosh.
yeah. Anyway,
You're
but
right.
well, um, yeah, like when I remember when playing that game, like I was like, I can climb everything like I can in Zelda, but nothing. There's nothing to climb up to, and so like just like little things like this that like makes me not necessarily like hold everything to the high standards of what Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is, because obviously like games are different. Like you shouldn't be comparing games with other games necessarily, on that being the sole aspect of comparison. But like it made me realize that, well, one, that I can actually play open world games, and two, that there's cool new ideas still in games, that haven't been explored, and it kind of like made me branch out to different genres that I haven't tried.
So that's your pitch for best game of all time.
Yes,
Okay.
because it messed with my brain in a way that I can't look at games the same.
That is a good vote in its favor. I think I have to say, I guess I would be hard pressed. There are more Legend of Zelda games that would go on like a best game of all time list from me than there are games that wouldn't, like Legend of Zelda games that wouldn't.
Yeah,
Like the franchise in general has just been very stellar, outside of like a
yeah.
few outliers, or at worst like
At worst, they're
middling.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like none of them are outright bad. Again, aside from a couple of those outliers.
Have you ever played those CDI games?
I no, I've watched people play them.
Yeah, they're
I
those are a time.
I haven't seen or played Link's crossbow training.
Oh, I actually used to play that all the time.
Is it fun?
It's a pretty fun like arcade shooter. Very bare bones though, so like don't expect too much. But like it feels like it belongs in the Wii Sports like genre of games.
Oh, okay. With kind of that caveat, like, yeah, absolutely, this game is like one of the best games of all time.
Mm.
I both love this game. I would say that this game is head and shoulders better than Skyrim.
Oh,
Um, I
100%.
I would play this game far longer than I played like Skyrim. I probably will end up playing this game far longer than I played Skyrim. The major impediment for me right now is just like time.
Yeah.
This industry just gets more games every year,
There
and
too many.
they're bigger.
Like whenever someone says too many games, like there's too many games.
Yeah, I mean, literally, like it's not really a complaint.
Yeah,
It's just
no,
like
yeah, it's
a
just
statement of fact.
yeah. There's an overwhelming amount of games, and it's impossible to play them all. And as someone who enjoys video games and like loves talking and like about video games, like it's frustrating that you can't play everything all the time. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, like I waited for like 12 years for The Last Guardian to come out, and I have it sitting right here. I have only played it for about 45 minutes.
Yeah.
and I waited for this game for 12 years. I still want to play this game. I just haven't had the time where I'm like sitting down. I'm like, all right, I'm in a headspace to play this.
See, that's when my brain goes to, how can I turn this into content so that I get it done?
Well, I mean that's the other thing. I'm trying to like decouple like what I play for enjoyment necessarily
which is healthy.
from like yeah, because like basically for like the last 4 years it's like, man, I really want to play D&D. I better turn it into a podcast so that I can justify spending the time prepping and playing
the
it.
contentification of your enjoyment of your things you like.
And this is the part of the podcast where we get sad about capitalism, everybody.
Oh yeah, we live in a hellscape.
Mm-hmm. And if you're listening and wondering why like me and most of my guests have that kind of reaction, it's because we work freelance and it's not that great.
Yeah.
Yay!
It's not that great.
So on that note, where can people find your work on the internet, Jared?
Well, right now, as I said, I will be having some new things pop up pretty soon. So if you're looking for anything that I'm doing, go to twitter.com/quesobros. That's I live on Twitter. I probably shouldn't because it's a garbage hellhole. But
you have 10,000 people plus on there who listen to your stuff where you make it less garbage.
Yeah, I talk about cheese sometimes.
See, cheese, well, I mean, I guess cheese is technically garbage.
Yeah, especially
like
when it's my favorite
moldy
food and I'm lactose intolerant.
Oh no!
It doesn't work out too well. But yeah. So
wait,
like,
then how do you wind up with a name like Queso Bros?
So do you want me to tell you the story of how I got my handle?
I would love you to tell me that story.
Okay, so growing up, me and my brother, whenever my mom was like, okay, the internet's a thing, you and your brother need to share an email address so that just so that we're not having you two go off in two completely separate directions and whatnot on the internet, because we were like 8. And so like we came up with Queso Bros because we're half Mexican, so we were like, okay, queso, Spanish word for cheese. We like cheese, and we're brothers, so we went with the bros, and we like Mario and whatnot, so we went with Queso Bros. And it stuck with me as my handle from the future on, and yeah, he doesn't use that handle at all. We don't have like Queso Bros 1 or Queso Bros 2. But yeah, that's the history of that.
That's pretty cute. I'm not gonna lie.
No, yeah, it was when I think about it, it's pretty adorable.
Sorry, I totally interrupted your plug.
No, it's cool. But yeah, twitter.com/quesobros is pretty much where you'll see me doing most of my stuff. And yeah, stay tuned. There will be stuff coming soon.
Ooh, mysterious. And is there anything I mean, I guess you just gave it, so I won't even ask.
No, yeah, it's all good.
But yeah, everybody, thank you for coming on, Jared. I loved having you on. You're welcome back anytime you want to talk about a game or game stuff. I'm down. You are now, I dub thee friend of the show.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
The title, friend of the show. Graphics pop up.
I should prep that graphics package. That'd be fun. But thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it, and you're a lovely human being.
Thank you. You are as well.
Oh. And on that note, if you are listening to the show, it would be lovely if you came and became a patron. Patreon.com/bestgamesperiod. If you back us for $1 or more every month, you get access to the latest episode, which you get a week earlier than non-patrons. And you also get access to a bunch of super special exclusive episodes. On top of that, if you back at the $5 and above level, you also get access to our super cool chill live streams that are exclusive for backers to just kind of come and hang out, and we can chat while I edit episodes. It's great.
Go give them all your money.
And let's see, is there anything else? If you don't want to do that, it's always helpful for subscribing and liking and leaving reviews on SoundCloud and Libsyn, or really any podcasting app. We're also on Spotify. Really, all of the places. We're everywhere. So check us out. And you should also check out A Podcast by Moonlight, the latest podcast I launched with the wonderful Marcus Stewart, which is now live. The first episode is up. The second episode will be dropping on Wednesday. And I'm trying to think if I am missing anything else. I'm thinking that I will be editing the season finale of We Wanted Adventurers sometime this week. I would love to have that up and out so that we can kind of put a nail in that show for now. And we'll probably have a fun editing live stream for that episode as well. So don't miss that. And you can follow us on Twitter at bestgamesperiod. Do that.
Do it.
And I think that's it. Breath of the Wild. It's a best game period, and it's great. You should go check it out if you haven't yet, which you probably have because it's the highest attach rate game on the Switch.
Go play it again.
I mean, give it your best shot to play it again. And on that note, we'll be seeing you next time on the Flippity Dippity.
Bye.
Bye.